Welcome to English Horror Zone.
When you book a vacation rental, you expect a relaxing getaway. But have you ever stopped to wonder who else might have a key to the front door? Here are 3 true horror stories about Airbnb stays gone wrong. Let's begin. I was 24 when I decided to take a solo trip up to the Pacific Northwest. I've always been an introvert, so the idea of spending a week alone in a secluded cabin in Oregon sounded like paradise. I found a listing on Airbnb that looked perfect. It was a small A-frame cabin, totally isolated, miles from the nearest town. The reviews were stellar, mostly talking about how quiet and peaceful it was. The host, a guy named Elias, messaged me the door code a few hours before I arrived. He said he lived on a property about a mile down the road if I needed anything, but otherwise, I'd have total privacy. The first 2 nights were great. I spent the days hiking and the nights reading by the fireplace. But on the third night, things got weird. It was around 10 p.m., and I was in the kitchen making tea. The cabin had these massive floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out into the forest. During the day, the view was beautiful. At night, it was just a wall of black. I was waiting for the kettle to boil when I saw a flash of light outside. It was quick, like the reflection of a flashlight lens catching the porch light. I stepped closer to the glass, cupping my hands around my eyes to see out. Nothing. Just trees. I figured it was a deer, or maybe my mind playing tricks on me. I went to bed around midnight. The bedroom was in a loft upstairs, overlooking the living room. I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of heavy footsteps on the front porch. The wood was old, so every step creaked loudly. Creak, thud, creak, thud. My heart hammered against my ribs. I lay perfectly still, listening. The footsteps stopped right in front of the front door. Then, I heard the electronic keypad beep, 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 beep. Someone was typing in the code. My blood ran cold. The code Elias gave me. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. I heard wet boots stepping onto the hardwood floor. I quietly rolled out of bed and grabbed the heavy metal lamp from the nightstand. I crept to the edge of the loft railing and peered down into the living room. A man was standing in the center of the room. He wasn't stealing the TV. He wasn't looking for valuables. He was just standing there, facing the loft, staring up at where I was sleeping. He was wearing a heavy raincoat, and even in the dim light, I recognized him from his profile picture. He was Elias, the host. He stood there for 5 full minutes, just breathing. Then, he walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, took a sip of my orange juice directly from the carton, and put it back. He walked back to the door, punched in a code to lock it from the outside, and left. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. As soon as the sun came up, I packed my bag in 5 minutes and sprinted to my car. I drove to a motel 2 towns over and messaged Airbnb support immediately. I never confronted him. I was too scared of what he would do if he knew I was awake. But the thought that he felt comfortable enough to walk into my rental while I was sleeping, it makes me wonder how many times he's done it before. That was terrifying, knowing the owner was using his own key to spy on a guest. But this next encounter is even worse, because the threat didn't come from the owner. It came from someone trying to force their way in. That brings us to story number 2, which takes place in a high-rise apartment in Chicago. Last winter, my girlfriend Sarah and I booked a modern apartment in downtown Chicago for a weekend getaway. It was in a nice building with a secure lobby, so we felt pretty safe. The unit was on the 14th floor. On our second night, Sarah wasn't feeling well, so we decided to stay in and order pizza. We were watching a movie on the couch with the lights dimmed. Around 11:30 p.m., there was a knock at the door. I paused the movie. "That's gotta be the pizza," I said, checking my phone. The tracker said the driver was still 5 minutes away. I got up and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. "Hello?" I called out through the door. No answer. I figured it was a prank. Maybe kids running down the hall. I went back to the couch. 10 minutes later, the pizza actually arrived. I grabbed it, double-locked the deadbolt, and we started eating. Around midnight, the knocking started again. But this wasn't a polite tap. It was a slow, heavy thud, thud, thud. I went back to the peephole. Again, the hallway was empty. But as I leaned back, the doorknob jiggled. Someone was gripping it from the outside, turning it slowly left and right. "Who is there?" I yelled, trying to sound aggressive. "Open up!" A deep, raspy voice whispered from the other side. "I forgot my key." "You have the wrong apartment," I shouted. "Go away or I'm calling the police." "This is my apartment," the voice hissed. The jiggling turned into violent shaking. The door rattled in the frame. Then I heard the sound of metal scraping metal. He was trying to jam a key into the lock. Sarah ran into the bedroom to call 911. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. I stood in the hallway, watching the deadbolt. I could see it twisting slightly as the stranger tried to force a key that didn't fit. "I know you're in there," the man yelled, dropping the whisper. He threw his shoulder against the door. Bam! The wood splintered slightly around the frame. Bam! He hit it again and again. I was terrified the hinges would give way. For 3 minutes, he assaulted that door, screaming profanities and claiming we stole his home. Suddenly, the elevator dinged down the hall. The banging stopped instantly. I heard heavy footsteps sprinting toward the stairwell. When the police arrived, they found deep scratch marks all over the lock and a dent in the door. They talked to the building management. Apparently, the unit used to belong to a man who was evicted months ago for aggressive behavior. He had been stalking the listing online, waiting for when he knew people would be inside. We packed up and stayed at a hotel that night. I check the locks on every door I enter now, 3 times. Having someone try to break down your door is a high-stress nightmare. But at least they were on the outside. This final story is different. That brings us to story number 3, the most disturbing story of this collection. My friends and I, a group of 4 college students, rented a massive Victorian house in Savannah, Georgia for spring break. The house was old, built in the 1900s, with creaky floors and tons of bedrooms. It was cheap, huge, and seemed perfect for a party week. The house had 3 floors. The bedrooms were on the 2nd floor, and the 3rd floor was listed as "Storage Do Not Enter" on the Airbnb listing. The door to the 3rd floor was at the end of the hallway, secured with a heavy padlock. We respected the rules and didn't touch it. On the first night, we were all hanging out in the living room downstairs playing cards. It was late, maybe 2 a.m. Everyone was laughing and talking. But suddenly, my friend Mike held up a hand. "Shh! Do you guys hear that?" We went quiet. From directly above us on the 2nd floor, we heard footsteps. Soft, pacing footsteps, walking back and forth. "It's just the house settling, man," I said, though I felt a pit in my stomach. Old houses make noise. We brushed it off and went to bed. I took the master bedroom at the end of the hall, right next to the locked door to the 3rd floor. I fell asleep quickly, but I woke up around 4 a.m. to a sound that paralyzed me. It was the sound of a lock clicking open. Click, clack. I opened my eyes and looked at the gap under my bedroom door. The hallway light was off, but I could hear breathing right outside my room. Not the rhythmic breathing of sleep, this was shallow, excited breathing. Then, I heard the door to the 3rd floor creak open. The footsteps went up the stairs. I convinced myself I was dreaming. I eventually fell back asleep. The next morning, at breakfast, I asked the group who'd been walking around at 4 a.m. Everyone denied it. That night, I decided to stay awake. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. Footsteps. But they weren't coming from the hallway. They were coming from inside the wall behind my bed. It sounded like someone sliding through a tight space. Scrape, scrape. I jumped out of bed and turned on the light. I looked at the wall. There was a large, ornate mirror bolted to the wall. I had assumed it was just decoration, but now, seeing it in the light, I noticed the edges weren't flush with the plaster. I grabbed the side of the mirror and pulled. It swung open on hidden hinges. Behind the mirror wasn't a wall. It was a dark, narrow crawl space. And sitting right there, on the floor of the dusty crawl space, was a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, and a small chair. The chair was positioned directly facing the back of the mirror. I shone my phone light into the space. It was a 2-way mirror. Someone had been sitting in that crawl space, watching me sleep. I screamed for my friends. We ran out of that house, leaving half our stuff behind. When the police investigated, they found that the crawl space connected to the locked 3rd floor. The storage area wasn't for boxes. It was a living space for someone who wasn't the owner. The scariest part wasn't the 2-way mirror. It was finding my own wallet sitting on the chair in the crawl space. He had come into my room while I was sleeping, taken it, and brought it back inside the wall to look through it. Those were 3 true stories that make you question privacy in a stranger's house. Question of the day. If you found a 2-way mirror in your rental, Would you check to see what's behind it? Or would you run out of the house immediately without looking? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell for more true horror. Safe travels.